Have you ever popped the hood of a car and thought, there is no way this thing should be this good? The 1990s were full of moments like that. While everyone was busy worshiping the Supra and the Skyline, there were engines out there doing genuinely brilliant things and getting absolutely zero credit for it. Today, we are counting down 20 forgotten car engines from the 90s that were actually brilliant. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let us get into it. Number 20. The Opel C20XE 2.0-liter 16-valve. In Europe during the early 90s, this engine was whispered about in garages with an almost religious reverence. They called it the Red Top, a naturally aspirated 2-liter inline-4 producing 150 horsepower. Sounds modest. It was not. The C20XE found its way into the Vauxhall Astra GSI, the Calibra, and countless rally cars. And in every application, it was an absolute weapon. Dual overhead cams, 16 valves, and an intake manifold that breathed like it was designed by someone who genuinely understood airflow. It revved cleanly, responded instantly, and was absurdly reliable. Motorsport teams across Europe built entire campaigns around it. The BTCC, rally stages, hill climbs, the Red Top showed up everywhere and won constantly. But its real party trick was tunability. With a bolt-on turbo kit, enthusiasts were pulling 350 horsepower without the iron block even flinching. Ask most car enthusiasts today about the C20XE and you will get blank stares. It was overshadowed by flashier Japanese engines, but the people who know, they know. One of the finest naturally aspirated fours of its era, and a reminder that sometimes the best engines come from places you least expect. Number 19. The Chrysler 3.5-liter SOHC V6. In 1993, Chrysler quietly dropped an engine into its LH platform sedans that nobody expected. The 3.5-liter V6 powered the Dodge Intrepid, Eagle Vision, and eventually the Chrysler 300M. 214 horsepower from a naturally aspirated 6 sounded fine. But this engine was alarmingly smooth, the kind of smooth that made you wonder if Chrysler had accidentally hired Lexus engineers. It spun happily to 6,000 RPM, practically unheard of for a domestic V6. Chrysler designed it from scratch, with an aluminum block and heads, advanced combustion chambers, and a tuned intake system that gave it an almost European character. Critics praised it as one of Chrysler's most refined engines ever, but the cars it powered were never exciting, so the engine got lost. Nobody talked about the 3.5 because nobody talked about the Intrepid at car meets. But mechanics who worked on these knew the truth. Well-built, surprisingly durable, and far more sophisticated than Chrysler ever got credit for. It was a genuinely world-class engine trapped inside cars the enthusiast community ignored. And that is a real shame, because this thing deserved so much better. Number 18. The Fiat Coupe 2.0-liter, 20-valve turbo 220 horsepower from 2 liters, 5 valves per cylinder, 3 intake, 2 exhaust. 0 to 60 in about 6.3 seconds. The Fiat Coupe's turbocharged inline-4 made it one of the fastest front-wheel drive cars of the 90s. Most Turbo 4s of that era hit you with a wall of boost and ran out of breath. The Fiat just kept pulling, delivering power that felt relentless and addictive. It revved with distinctly Italian enthusiasm, sounding somewhere between a rally car and an angry espresso machine. The engine was derived from the Lancia Delta Integrale's powerplant, already proven in the World Rally Championship. Fiat refined it, added the 5-valve head, and created something genuinely special. But here is the frustrating part. The Fiat Coupe was never officially sold in North America. In Europe, Fiat's reputation for electrical gremlins meant most buyers dismissed the car entirely. The engine was spectacular, but the badge scared people away. Clean examples are becoming increasingly rare now, and the few enthusiasts who own them treat their 20-valve turbos like family heirlooms. Number 17. The Rover K-Series. Mention this engine to most car people, and they immediately bring up head gasket failures. And look, some of that reputation is deserved. But here is what gets lost in the jokes. The K-Series was genuinely revolutionary. When it launched, it was one of the lightest production engines in the world. All aluminum construction with an innovative through-bolt design that was ahead of its time. In its most famous application, the original Lotus Elise, the 1.8-liter K-Series, weighed barely over 200 pounds. That lightweight was absolutely critical to making the Elise the handling legend it became. Without the K-Series, there is no Elise. Period. The variable valve timing versions produced 160 horsepower from 1.8 liters, competitive with anything Honda offered. Rover used it across their entire lineup, from the MGF to the Land Rover Freelander, and it powered several generations of Lotus sports cars. It won races, set lap records, and proved British engineering could compete globally. The head gasket issue, eventually fixable with upgraded components, overshadowed everything else. When it worked, it was magnificent. Sometimes the line between brilliance and disaster is thinner than a head gasket. In this case, literally. Number 16. The Nissan SR20 DET. While everyone was obsessing over the RB26 in the Skyline GTR, Nissan had another turbocharged engine doing extraordinary things with far less fanfare. The SR20 DET was a 2-liter turbo inline-4 that powered the Silvia, the 240SX, and the genuinely insane Pulsar GTIR. In the Pulsar, this little engine produced 227 horsepower through an all-wheel drive system, turning a humble hatchback into a rally-bred weapon. Built to satisfy Group A homologation requirements, the GTIR could embarrass cars costing 3 or 4 times as much. But the SR20 DET's real magic was its iron block, practically indestructible. Enthusiasts discovered it could handle massive boost without complaint. 300 horsepower was easy, 500, 600, even 700 was achievable on the stock block. That is insane for a 2-liter 4-cylinder. Drift culture eventually gave the SR20 DET some recognition, but by then it was already a relic. In the 90s, it lived entirely in the shadow of Nissan's bigger, more glamorous engines, and the Pulsar GTIR was practically unknown outside Japan and Europe. Number 15. The Subaru EG33 3.3-liter flat-six Subaru took their signature boxer layout and added 2 more cylinders. The result was the EG33, a 3.3-liter flat-six powering the SVX, one of the strangest and most beautiful coupes of the decade. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, the SVX looked like nothing else, and the engine was equally unconventional. 230 horsepower, silky smooth, with a naturally aspirated delivery emphasizing refinement over aggression. This was the anti-turbo Subaru, a grand touring engine from a company known for mud-splattered Imprezas. The flat-six configuration gave it a low center of gravity and an exhaust note unlike any Subaru or most competitors. It was unique in every sense. But the SVX suffered from automatic-only transmission, considerable weight, and a price tag putting it against BMW and Lexus. Sales were disappointing, and Subaru abandoned it after 1 generation. The EG33 died with it. Never used in another production car, it proved Subaru could build more than turbocharged rally machines, but the market was not ready for a luxury Subaru in 1992. Sometimes being brilliant is not enough if nobody gives you a chance. The EG33 never got that chance, and the automotive world is poorer for it. Number 14. The Mitsubishi FTO Mivec V6. The Mitsubishi FTO won Japanese Car of the Year in 1994. Then it vanished from history. The top-spec GPX used a 2-liter V6 with Mivec variable valve timing, producing 200 horsepower. From 2 liters. Naturally aspirated. In 1994. Wild. The Mivec system switched between 2 cam profiles, creating a Jekyll and Hyde character. Below 4,000 revolutions per minute, smooth and civilized. Above 4,000, the aggressive cams kicked in, and the engine came alive with genuine ferocity. It revved eagerly to 7,500 revolutions per minute, sounding high-pitched, mechanical, and utterly unlike anything else in Mitsubishi's lineup. Essentially a miniature racing engine in a practical front-wheel drive coupe. But the FTO was never officially sold in North America or most of Europe. It was a Japanese domestic market car, with only gray imports reaching the United Kingdom and Australia. If Mitsubishi had given it global distribution, we might discuss it alongside the Integra Type R. Instead, it is a footnote, genuinely unfair for an engine that was this good. Number 13. The Honda H22A VTEC. Honda built a lot of great engines in the 90s. The B-Series gets all the love. But the H22A was arguably better and received a fraction of the attention. This 2.2-liter VTEC inline-4 powered the 5th-generation Prelude and produced 200 naturally aspirated horsepower, with a red line climbing past 7,000 revolutions per minute. It was the engine behind Honda's active torque transfer system, one of the most advanced front-wheel drive handling systems ever devised. The VTEC crossover was a masterclass. Below the switchover, docile and easy. Above it, a rush of power and a change in exhaust note that was practically addictive. Honda engineers tuned every aspect for driver engagement, and it showed. But the Prelude never captured the public's imagination like the Civic and Integra. More expensive, less practical, no grassroots racing culture, the H22A was also harder to swap into other chassis, limiting its aftermarket appeal. So while the B-Series became legendary, the H22A quietly faded. Absurd because in terms of outright engineering, it was arguably the better engine, more power, more torque, more refinement. Honda at its absolute best, barely remembered. Number 12. The Mazda KLDE 2.5-liter V6. This 2.5-liter V6 was a naturally aspirated masterpiece that most people have completely forgotten, and that is a crime. It produced 164 horsepower, which does not sound like much until you learn it could rev to 7,000 RPM from a 2.5-liter V6. In the 90s, that was practically unheard of. It out-revved Honda's 6s. It out-revved most of Toyota's lineup, an engine that rewarded drivers who kept it in the upper reaches of the tachometer and sounded glorious doing it. The KLDE powered the Mazda MX-6 and the Ford Probe GT, both cars the enthusiast world largely ignored. Ford had considered making the Probe a Mustang replacement, and sharing an engine with a Mazda did not endear it to muscle car fans. But anyone who drove a Probe GT with the KLDE knew the truth. The lightweight design, the high-revving nature, the smoothness. It felt more like a European sports car engine than anything from Detroit. The KLDE turned skeptics into believers, but only if they drove it. Most never did. They saw Ford Probe and kept walking. Their loss. A genuinely great engine let down by the cars that wore its name. Number 11. The Toyota 3S GTE Turbo. Toyota had a turbocharged inline-4 in the 90s that was anything but boring. The 3S GTE was a 2-liter turbo powering both the Celica GT4 and the second-generation MR2 turbo. In its most potent form, about 245 horsepower. It helped the Celica GT4 win 2 World Rally Championship manufacturers' titles and 3 drivers' championships. But here is what made it truly special. It was a Toyota. That meant it was engineered for reliability in ways competitors simply were not. The bottom end was robust, the turbo system durable, and with proper maintenance, these engines ran for hundreds of thousands of miles without major issues. Performance plus Toyota reliability was almost unfair. The MR2 turbo application was particularly exciting. Mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, 245 horsepower, with genuine turbo urgency, a recipe for both exhilaration and occasional terror. The MR2 earned a reputation for snap-over steer, but the engine was never the problem. Yet despite its rally pedigree, the 3 SGTE never achieved the legendary status of the 2JZ, always the other Toyota turbo engine. A shame, because in many ways, it was the more impressive achievement. Number 10, the Porsche M44 3.0-liter inline-4. The 968's engine was extraordinary. A 3-liter inline-4, the largest 4-cylinder in any production car at the time, producing 240 naturally aspirated horsepower. It debuted Porsche's VarioCam variable valve timing system, and 2-time World Rally champion Walter Röhrl drove the 968 Club Sport and said it had the best handling of any Porsche he had ever driven. Let that sink in. The 3-liter 4 was remarkably smooth, using a balance shaft to eliminate vibrations you would expect from such a large 4-cylinder. It had a broad, usable torque curve that felt almost like a small 6, and it revved with genuine eagerness. The VarioCam system worked beautifully, using a hydraulic chain tensioner to adjust intake cam timing. But the 968 had a perception problem. A 4-cylinder Porsche in a world expecting 6 cylinders from Stuttgart. Enthusiasts dismissed it as lesser, a stepping stone. Sales were modest, and when production ended in 1995, Porsche abandoned the transaxle layout entirely. The engine died with the car. Those who drove it knew the truth. That 3-liter 4 was one of Porsche's finest moments. Criminal that so few remember it. If you ever get the chance to drive a 968, do not hesitate. You will understand immediately. Number 9. The Saab B234 R 2.3-liter turbo Saab had been perfecting turbocharging since the late 1970s, and by the 9000 Aero in 1993, they had mastered it. The B234R produced 225 horsepower and 252 pound-feet of torque with a smoothness that embarrassed far more expensive German sedans. The turbo came on progressively, without the violent surge characterizing most boosted engines of the era. Autocar magazine tested the Carlson version and reported it was as quick from 50 to 70 in fifth gear as any production car they had ever tested. Any. That included M5 BMWs and AMG Mercedes costing 5 or 6 times as much. The Saab accomplished this with fundamental simplicity. A 16-valve twin-cam 4 with a single turbocharger. No exotic materials, no variable valve timing, just really good engineering. The mid-range torque was phenomenal, and the engine pulled from low RPM to redline with relentless authority. But Saab's small size and unconventional image meant the 9000 Aero was always an outsider against the BMW 5 Series and Mercedes E-Class. The B234R deserved celebration as one of the great performance engines of the 90s. Instead, it faded when Saab began its long decline. Number 8. The Mitsubishi 6G7-2 twin-turbo V6 320 horsepower from a 3-liter twin-turbo V6, all-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, active aerodynamics, electronically controlled suspension. In 1990, this level of technology was unheard of outside supercars. The 6G7-2 used sequential turbocharging, with the smaller turbo handling low RPM and the larger one taking over higher up. The result was smooth, progressive, relentless power delivery. The 3000 GT VR4 hit 60 in about 5 seconds, matching the Porsche 911 Turbo at roughly half the price. The iron block construction proved surprisingly robust, and tuners discovered the 6G7 II handled far more boost than stock. 400, 500, even 600 horsepower was achievable with basic upgrades. But the 3000 GT was always overshadowed. The 300ZX got more press. The Supra got more love. The Skyline got legend status. The Mitsubishi was dismissed as too heavy and too complicated, which was partially true. But the engine was a masterpiece of forced induction engineering, deserving far more recognition than it ever received. If you can find a clean VR4 today, buy it. Seriously, you will not regret it. Number 7. The Volkswagen VR6. What do you do when you want 6 cylinders but only have room for 4? If you are Volkswagen, you invent an entirely new engine configuration. The VR6 used a narrow 15-degree angle between cylinder banks with a single cylinder head, splitting the difference between a V6 and an inline-6. Compact enough for a Golf engine bay, powerful enough to transform the Corrado into a genuine performance car. The 2.8-liter version produced 178 horsepower. Not revolutionary numbers, but the character was entirely its own. The exhaust note was deep, resonant, and exotic. It sounded like it belonged in something costing twice as much. The narrow angle design gave it smoothness rivaling traditional inline-6s while maintaining compact packaging. Genuinely clever engineering that made competitors scratch their heads. The Corrado VR6 was its finest moment, a practical front-wheel drive coupe that could cruise the Autobahn all day and tackle mountain passes with enthusiasm. But the Corrado never sold well, and its discontinuation in 1995 cost the VR6 its most charismatic home. Tuners later discovered the strong bottom end handled turbocharging beautifully, with some builds exceeding 600 horsepower. An engine born from packaging necessity became one of the most versatile power plants of its era. Volkswagen engineers deserve a standing ovation for this one. Number 6. The Volvo B5234T turbocharged 5-cylinder. When you think Volvo in the 90s, you think safety, seatbelts, cars your parents drove. You do not think of a turbocharged 5-cylinder engine that turned a family station wagon into a touring car contender, but the B5234T was exactly that. 2.3 liters, turbocharged, up to 240 horsepower in the 850ER. 5-cylinder engines have an inherent asymmetry, giving them a sound unlike anything else. Not as smooth as a 6, not as raw as a 4. Simultaneously refined and slightly unhinged. The 850R and T5R were factory hot rods. Volvo took a sensible estate, strapped on a turbo, stiffened the suspension, and sent it to the British Touring Car Championship, where it shocked everyone by being competitive against dedicated sports sedans. A Volvo estate car, racing, and winning. The turbo system, developed with Porsche input, came on with satisfying surge. You could do the school run in the morning and set fastest laps at a track day in the afternoon. Same car. But because it wore a Volvo badge, nobody took it seriously. The car world saw a station wagon. The smart people saw a masterpiece. Number 5. The Chevrolet LT 55.7-liter DOHC V8. General Motors asked Lotus Engineering to build a V8. What came back shocked the automotive world. The LT5 was a 5.7-liter all-aluminum dual overhead cam V8, producing 375 horsepower. Every other GM V8 used pushrods dating to the 50s. The LT5 used 4 camshafts, 32 valves, and a valet key that literally reduced power when you handed your keys to someone you did not trust. GM built an engine so powerful they included a system to make it slower. In the Corvette ZR1, the LT5 powered what was briefly the fastest production car in the world. It outran Ferraris and Porsches globally. Lotus designed the aluminum heads with nearly perfectly optimized intake ports. The irony is it was almost too good. Expensive to produce, complicated to service, and replaced after just 4 years by the LS1, which used traditional push rods and proved you did not need overhead cams for serious power. The LS family became one of the most successful ever, completely overshadowing the LT5. Today, it is a fascinating footnote. The engine that proved America could build a world-class DOHC V8 then decided it did not want to. Number 4. The Alfa Romeo Busso V6. Some engines convert fuel into motion. Others make music. The Busso V6 made music. Designed by Giuseppe Busso in the early 70s, the 60-degree V6 reached its finest form in the 90s with the 3-liter 24-valve DOHC unit in the 164 GTV and Spider. Just over 200 horsepower, but the numbers were irrelevant. This engine was about experience. From the moment you turned the key, the Busso announced itself with what Evo magazine called the most glorious-sounding 6-cylinder road engine ever made. The DOHC version used an aluminum block with sodium-filled exhaust valves, technology typically reserved for racing. In DTM trim, Busso derivatives produced over 400 horsepower and won 38 of 89 races entered. Staggering for a road car-based engine. But Alfa Romeo's reliability reputation, limited dealers outside Italy, and an image that could not compete with German prestige meant the Busso never sold as it deserved. When the last one was produced in 2005, Giuseppe Busso himself passed away days later, as if creator and creation were inseparable. They called it the violin of Arese. They were not wrong. Number 3. The Mazda KJZEM 2.3-liter Miller Cycle V6. In 1995, Mazda introduced an engine using technology so advanced that most people had no idea what it was. The KJZEM used the Miller cycle, a thermodynamic process theorized for decades but never implemented in a mass production car. It works by closing intake valves early, reducing compression during intake while maintaining higher expansion ratio during the power stroke. More energy extracted from each combustion event. Better efficiency and power simultaneously. To compensate for reduced air charge, Mazda fitted a Lysholm-type supercharger providing boost with minimal parasitic losses. 210 horsepower and 210 pound-feet of torque from 2.3 liters, with fuel economy significantly better than comparable engines of similar output. Performance of a 3-liter engine, consumption of a 2-liter. Mazda essentially cheated physics, and nobody noticed. The Millennia S competed against Lexus and Acura, but was too anonymous for its own good. Most buyers had no idea what Miller cycle meant, and Mazda's marketing never communicated just how special this was, one of the most innovative production engines of the 90s, and almost nobody remembers it. Mazda solved a problem most engineers did not know existed, and the world shrugged. Number 2. The Mazda K8-DE 1.8-liter V6. During Japan's economic bubble, Mazda dropped a V6 into a tiny affordable coupe called the MX-3, 1.8 liters, spread across 6 cylinders. The K8-DE was the smallest mass-produced V6 in the world. Each cylinder displaced roughly 300 cubic centimeters, about the size of a coffee mug. The 60-degree aluminum block had dual overhead cams, 24 valves, and revved to 7,500 RPM with almost reckless eagerness. 130 horsepower sounds modest until you remember this engine was 4-cylinder sized. Mazda's variable resonance induction system optimized the torque curve using dual resonance tubes with butterfly valves at different engine speeds, a clever solution to the fundamental problem of small displacement sixes having torque peaks uncomfortably high. The MX-3 cost about the same as a base Miata and offered a driving experience completely unique. No competitor matched the smoothness of a six-cylinder at this price. But the rising yen, expensive insurance for coupes, and a market that just did not understand it killed the MX-3 in North America after just 3 model years. Finding a clean V6 model today is genuinely difficult. The K8-DE proved that sometimes the most brilliant engineering comes in the smallest packages. Number 1. The Ford SHO V6 by Yamaha. And here we are. Number 1. An engine designed for a mid-engine Ferrari fighter built by a motorcycle manufacturer and eventually stuffed into the most boring-looking sedan in America. The Ford SHO V6, built by Yamaha. In 1984, Ford approached Yamaha to develop a high-performance V6. What came back remains one of the most underappreciated engines in automotive history. A 3-liter iron block with aluminum dual overhead cam heads, 4 valves per cylinder, and a variable length intake manifold that looked like modern sculpture. 220 horsepower at 7,000 revolutions per minute, limited only because the accessories could not survive higher revs. The engine itself handled 8,500 effortlessly. In the 1989 Taurus SHO, it created the second fastest 4-door in the world, trailing only the BMW M5 at 3 times the price, 6.6 seconds to 60, 143 miles per hour, in a car that looked like something your accountant drives, the ultimate sleeper. Originally designed for a mid-engine Ford sports car, codenamed GN34, intended to fight Ferrari, Ford killed the project to develop the Explorer. The SHO V6 passed emissions without an EGR system outside California, nearly unheard of in the late 80s. One enthusiast ran 1,100 wheel horsepower on the stock block. It made 5 fewer horses than the Mustang's 5-liter V8, with 2 liters less displacement, better economy, more sophistication. But because it lived in a Taurus, nobody cared. The most brilliant forgotten engine of the 90s, it is time the world recognized it. And there you have it, 20 forgotten engines from the 90s that were actually brilliant. From tiny V6s to turbocharged 5-cylinders to a 4-cylinder Porsche that a rally champion called the best he ever drove. The 90s were packed with engineering masterpieces the world overlooked. Which one surprised you the most? Did we miss any hidden gems? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip under the hood of automotive history, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you do not miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.